I need a name. Batboy, Nightwing. I don't know, what do you think? What's a good sidekick name?
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Greetings and salutations, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso. And today, I'm going to talk to you about everyone's favorite sidekick and the most underappreciated actor who ever portrayed him. Today, we're covering Chris O'Donnell's time as the boy wonder Robin. Robin may just be one of the most overlooked and underappreciated elements of the first four Batman films. While he's brought up in conversations, I find more often than not it skews more toward bad than good, but I personally don't think it's all that justified. There are a lot of problems with this particular performance, but there's also plenty of praise to raise down on it as well. When discussing Chris's time in the role, I find it's best to break it down into two parts, and those two parts being the two movies that he starred in as the character. It's the same role, the same actor in the role, and even the same director guiding that role? I don't know, I had to finish it. But there's a fine line between the Robin we got in Batman Forever and the Robin we get in Batman and Robin. In the first Schumacher Batman film, there was a lot more nuance to this performance. We're introduced to a young man who's just faced the same trauma that Bruce Wayne has, made to experience the very same pain that turned Bruce into Batman. Bruce selflessly steps in to provide for the young man, and silently guides him down a better path that he himself walks. But ultimately, the kid involves himself in Bruce's world, and goes completely against his wishes and aids him in his fight to stop crime. Try as Bruce may, he just can't seem to talk sense into this headstrong hero in training. In terms of being an accurate depiction of fiction's most famous sidekick, there are a couple things that separate this on-screen iteration from the character from the cartoon and comic panels. The most obvious of which being age. Chris O'Donnell was playing a character nicknamed the Boy Wonder at 25. Though the character in this continuity was supposed to be around 16 or 17 years old, it was still very obvious that he was being played by a man. A young man, mind you, but a man nonetheless. The aging up has its up and downs. This creative decision comes with a lot of benefits, but also with some blemishes as well. This was always a factor that I wasn't too sure of how it would look on the big screen. I think there's a level and several layers of reality removed when you're watching a cartoon kid get beat up in a fight, rather than watching an actual child in a costume be beaten by grown men. You know, one is a little bit easier to stomach than the other. It also makes Robin's decision to take on the whole crime-fighting gig feel more like it's his own decision, and also, it helps that he has some idea of the gravity of the situation. And just in general, I think it would have been a little bit harder to justify a 9-year-old karate-kicking those he comes up against. However, aging the character up does sort of convolute and confuse the dynamic of the dynamic duo. Certain integral plot points and story beats come off as laughable and completely unjustified. This orphan being taken in by Bruce Wayne is now very confusing. Being that Chris O'Donnell was already grown, this charity doesn't feel at all necessary. He was supposedly 17. He still had his circus family, even if he did just lose all his blood circus relatives. True, he wouldn't have seen a life of luxury before Bruce Wayne, but he would have been taken care of, I would think. In Batman Forever, they have a much more traditional mentor-protege relationship, while in Batman and Robin, the two are billed and treated as equals. Or at least Robin struggles to be seen as Batman's equal. Creative couldn't decide if Robin was supposed to be Batman's pseudo-son, or his potential younger brother. In the first movie, Batman takes Robin under his Batwing, but in the second movie, the two are at constant odds, with Robin wanting to be seen as being on Batman's level. Robin reads more like an annoying little brother desperately seeking his older sibling's validation. Despite the age difference, I think in a lot of ways, Chris O'Donnell really personified Robin. Just maybe not the Robin that he was playing. While he may share a name and an origin story with the original Robin, Dick Grayson, personality-wise, he comes off much more like a Jason Todd. In the comics, the first Boy Wonder is a total Boy Scout. He and Bruce had their differences over time, but in his youth, he was just a good soldier, blindly following orders with very little resistance. He did what he was told and asked no questions. Of course, this is really just an oversimplification of the character, but he is remembered as the perfect sidekick. His successor, however, was kinda written to be the exact opposite. Jason Todd was an impulsive and at times, selfish, immature brat. He had an attitude, and was just as likely to do his own thing as he was to follow orders. A character much more in line with the character that Chris O'Donnell played. It almost felt as if Schumacher's approach to the character was to make him a PG Jason Todd just with Dick Grayson's backstory. And if that was the intent, I would say he succeeded. Chris O'Donnell personified rebellious youth. He was a young man with an attitude problem and a chip on his shoulder. He had a retort and response for everything, even when he wasn't being asked a question. He's an adrenaline junkie that lives for the moment and treats every moment as if it were his last. He has a lust for life that your traditional do-gooder just doesn't. There's a clear, reckless nature to him that I think really helps emphasize and spotlight the character's youth and immaturity. The kid had a constant need for speed, shown to have a fondness for fast cars, fast bikes, and fast women. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Just saying, the guy was a total thrill seeker. And again, all of this much better describes the second Robin than it does the first. I'm not entirely sure that this was the intent, because I think the changes made to Robin were probably made to better reflect the times. You know, this was the Bart Simpson generation. We romanticized the rebel, and this Robin was symbolic of that. Unlike the second Robin from the comics, the first and only Robin from the movies wasn't as entirely hated. Dick Grayson, while being defiant and unruly, was never the outright menace that Jason was. He brought an energy to the role that redeemed him and made him somewhat charming. He was likable, and despite his fits, he was still someone that you wanted to see achieve. Point blank, this Robin was rough, but only around the edges. I think this change in personality also added to the character's credibility. Dick Grayson's background and risky behavior give him all the credentials he needs as a crime fighter. He has awesome acrobatic agility from years of being a circus performer. This gives him the ability to keep up with Batman on the battlefield that is Gotham City. His knowledge of all things car-related allow him to properly use the Bat-related vehicles. His daredevil antics determine his fearless nature. And he could fight because he was a punk kid and part-time carny. This attitude is not only fitting for the times, but also fitting for the story of the movie that he was in. Dick Grayson's unique set of skills were all justified, and given this specific upbringing, him stepping into the sidekick role seemed legitimate. While he and Bruce may seem like kindred spirits, brothers through bond, that's not entirely true. They can be contrasted just about as much as they could be compared. They both have a thirst for justice, but their sense of justice isn't entirely the same. Their method of going about achieving it is also different. As a matter of fact, initially this Robin's sense of justice ranges a lot closer to revenge. Desperately seeking to avenge his parents and kill their killer, he initially takes crime fighting at face value, wanting to engage with it to literally fight crime, to harm criminals, using it as a vessel to relieve himself of the pain of losing a parent. He doesn't involve himself outside of a need for justice, but instead out of a desire for revenge. Yet, this doesn't ruin the character. Yes, that's not the proper depiction of the Gold Star Boy Wonder, but man, is that on brand for a young man fueled by feeling instead of fact. Hopped up on emotions and casting logic aside, blinded by rage that's born from pain. Even if his intentions are good, he is still far too driven by anger. This turn of events I've always felt made Robin feel real. That's a very real reaction to such hurt and heartbreak, especially when it's happening to someone who's still developing. It isn't overly emphasized. As a matter of fact, I think a lot of this arc is downplayed because it probably was deemed a little bit too dark for what they were trying to sell. McDonald's cups. But it's still present in the product, and more importantly, in the performance. However, what's evident is that despite his shotgun approach to cape work, throwing fists before answering questions, this Robin still had the heart of a hero. In any given instant, even before he's been gifted a costume, this Robin never showed an ounce of hesitation when it came to the safety of others, for the sole fact it was the right thing to do. He was selfless to a fault. Even at his worst, this Robin is still heroic. He's still willing to sacrifice his safety, and maybe even his life, so long as it meant that he could save another. Regardless of his standoffish nature, he always meant well, instinctively standing up for the helpless, even when he doesn't necessarily have the means of doing so. This Robin leaps into action regardless of consequence. I think Alfred said it best.
But your father was right. You are a hero.
What's really clear when you're watching this character is that it's not meant to be a final product. Being as Batman Forever serves as Robin's origin story, this is only just the beginning. The movie really shows the importance of Bruce in Dick Grayson's life. He didn't just put a roof over his head, he gave him a proper path to follow, even if he did so begrudgingly. And Alfred, of course, also paved the way for this dynamic to play out.
I took the liberty, sir.
Without Bruce's influence, Grayson would have tried to take Two-Face's life without a second thought. I love the dynamic of this duo in the first movie. There's some really powerful moments between the two, and their whole narrative is one of the strongest elements of the whole film. In Robin, Batman sees himself, helpless, unexpectedly orphaned, alone. Batman sought out what he believed was justice, ending the life of the man who took the lives of his parents, only to forever be haunted by the event and the realization that he had become what he'd sworn to stop. He regrets his decision, and is actively trying to stop Robin from suffering that same fate. Batman tries to guide Robin, but Robin rejects his morals, opting to live by his own judgments. Eventually, the Dark Knight relents, and accepts that the Boy Wonder has to live by his own code. But when confronted with the opportunity to take Two-Face's life, he doesn't. At his own volition, he does things by the book. I really appreciate that, because for me as a fan of the character, this always felt like a defining moment for the hero. This was a giant leap in the right direction. He was inching closer to being the Robin that we all know and love. There's a pretty strong and underspoken moment in the finale of Batman Forever, where Batman tosses false coins into the air, intentionally tricking Two-Face into falling to his death. This is Batman rewarding Robin for his decision by giving him exactly what he wanted, while still sparing him the burden of having murder on his conscience. Being that this is a burden that Batman already carries, he sort of sacrifices his soul to save his friends. Silently, that speaks volumes about the character's moralities, mentalities, and more importantly, their friendship. For what it's worth, I've always thought that with the tone of the movie and the time period that this was made in, Chris made for a pretty damn good Robin. He was believable in the role that he was given, and I think he brought a little bit of credibility to the character during a time when Hollywood was still unsure of him. I actually really appreciate this Robin. Not just Chris O'Donnell's time in the role, but even the window dressing of the character. Small details like having the original outfit and iconic design used as a circus look. Having that be the Flying Grayson's costume. It's not only accurate to the source, but it's also a nice nod to the fandom. Being done at a time where fan service really wasn't a thought. There's a lot to love with this Robin, but the issue with this praise only extends as far as the closing credits of Batman Forever. Because Batman and Robin, well, Batman and Robin was an entirely different experience. While I can safely say that aesthetically this was a big upgrade, giving Robin his Nightwing suit early, just now with a color swap and a cape, it's a pretty inspired choice. Overall, good look. Could have done without the nipples and the codpiece, but, you know, I mean, Joel Schumacher's directing, so you're gonna get that. Regardless, I would never snicker at the rest of the suit, because I think that it was surprisingly one of the coolest Robin costumes ever put to screen. I still think that it is one of the coolest looks Robin has ever gotten. If you could just overlook the codpiece and the rubber boobs, I'm telling you, this suit stands out. It's impressive. Far less impressive is the material he was given to work with in this movie. The best way to describe Batman and Robin would be to say that it is more rubber nipples than it is Nightwing chest plate. Anyway, while I do think the suit was a significant upgrade from the Robin costume in the last movie, everything else about the character really just felt like a major downgrade. And I mean this in just about every way imaginable. Like, all around bad. From a fighting standpoint, in Batman Forever he was holding his own and taking on street gangs before he was ever trained by Batman. And now he's having a hard time handling himself against Batgirl before she's been trained by Batman? Excuse me? This kid is getting his ass kicked by Alfred's niece? In terms of characterization, I wouldn't say that the character was drastically changed in the second installment. It somewhat felt in line with the character that was presented in the first film, but it lost all the charm that it carried. If you took all the bad qualities of the performance in Batman Forever, wiped out anything that made the character redeemable or even likable, that would be the Robin from Batman and Robin. Everything that made him special was missing. and in its place was an exaggeration of every negative quality present in the film prior. The character is depicted as being a whiny, selfish brat who puts his own personal needs as his top priority. He spends all of the runtime complaining that he's not as respected as Batman, but also not making any decisions or choices that Batman would make. So when the film finally acknowledges him as being on Batman's level, you kinda wish it didn't, because he's proved otherwise. He's been immature, he's been irrational. Why are we rewarding him? He argues with the Caped Crusader over the affections of a villainess, and then he sets his sights on the butler's pseudo-daughter. It's painfully obvious that Robin has nothing to do in Batman and Robin. And when he is given something to do, you really wish he wasn't. I actually think all the goodwill Batman Forever built up with the character was demolished by just how awful of a light he was painted in Batman and Robin. I truly think this Robin's bad reputation stems from Schumacher's second Batman film. But honestly, no one was good in that movie. How good could you be when you're in one of the worst movies ever made? It sort of speaks volumes to the substance of this iteration of the character that I was able to go on with paragraphs of praise in the first film, but I'm struggling to string along a couple sentences about his time in the second. There's really not that much to comment on. It's like going from passable to pass. Batman Forever provided a different but otherwise decent take on the Robin character. It got worse as time went on, but I will forever appreciate his performance in Batman Forever. Do I think he was the best Robin? No, absolutely not. But I certainly don't think he was the worst either. Chris O'Donnell is owed his due. He was the Robin of a generation, and I think he deserves to be brought up in the Cape conversation more. And with all that being said, if you like this video and would like to see a video on the worst Robin, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
I suspect the worst, Robin.
I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.